Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tired F1 podcast YouTube channel. I'm on my own, or at least I look like I'm on my own. Amar has abandoned me to a life of misery and loneliness. But luckily, I have an F1 grown-up to talk to, so no more yabbering with two idiots. I actually have someone professional. Say hello to Mr. Kunal Shah. Hello, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's actually good. I'm stepping in an FP1 session on the tired Grand Prix for Amar. And I think that's that's the flavor of Fridays in Mexico.
Uh, Thank you for coming back. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. If you guys don't remember Kunal, where have you been? Um, but Kunal is a pundit for Viaplay in Norway. Does the absolutely groundbreaking commentary for Fan Code in Hindi, no less, opening up Formula One to an entirely new audience, doing great things there. But also a co-host on the Inside Line F1 podcast. If you haven't checked it out, go do it now. But not just yet. Go do it after this. And Kunal, you've been super busy. This is the second podcast you've done today. I saw you streaming a preview before this. Insightful as always. But how do you find the time, my friend?
I I think it's just always the Formula One life. That's pretty much what it is. But it's a lot of time boxing, to be honest. It's a lot of time boxing because there is so much information, there is so much data. And after years of having done it, I know exactly who to speak to, what my sources are, what do I actually need to catch up. And one of the things I was trying to catch up on is why is Checo Perez not doing a demonstration run in Mexico? Because he's after a few days after Mexico, he's anyway driving uh, a Ferrari, a two-year-old Ferrari, to help Cadillac with their build-up for next year. But yeah, it's something that I believe was considered by certain people, but didn't happen
So
anyway.
what happened? Why is he not driving?
I
Can you
I
tell us?
No, it's not that eventually got an answer,
All right.
but I think it's actually down to a lot of logistics,
Yeah.
because truth be told, a demonstration run, even if you get a car, it's a lot of logistical stuff. Even though F1 is very happy to give you the slot to do a promotional run, because it's the first time since the Mexican Grand Prix returned that we actually don't have Checo Perez on the grid.
And yet, I think you guys brought this up on your preview episode. This is they still sold what 400,000 tickets. It's incredible.
Tickets, they're sold out. I'm very glad to know that Mexican fans have fallen in love with Formula
Yeah,
One
right.
thanks to Checo Perez. Their love is of course Perez, but it's also the larger sport, because I think there's a very interesting title battle shaping up, and I'm glad seats are not going to be empty in what I think is a fantastic Grand Prix venue.
Yeah, that baseball stadium. Why other people are not doing that is beyond me. But that was a great segue because there is a title battle to talk about, and there are now three protagonists. And Amar and I have been talking about this no end, arguing, sometimes vehemently about what is going on. I hope it doesn't descend into that, but it might. Let's see what happens. The first question I have is: we now have a driver who was 104 points behind the championship leader after the first race after the summer break. He's now 40 points behind Oscar Piastri. How has Max Verstappen done this? Tell me, because I don't get it.
I think there's two reasons. One of which we know that it's Max Verstappen, but he also needs the tools to do the magic that we call as Max Magic or Mad Max or Max Verstappen, literally. And I think it's a clear indication that Red Bull is throwing everything at it in the second half of the season. And if we consider the upgrades and the development cycle, Red Bull are bringing more upgrades than any other top team on the grid. In fact, even for Mexico, most teams have got upgrades which help with cooling characteristics of the car, whether it's the brakes or the engines, typically because that's what the high altitude does in Mexico. but Red Bull has also got what they call as local load. So when you read the upgrades and it, anything like performance or load, if those are the words you read, that means they are trying to extract more performance from the car. So Red Bull's throwing everything at it. McLaren has not got upgrades since at least a couple of races. So it's also down to the upgrade cycle. And hence, Red Bull has suddenly fallen into a window, into a balance that Max Verstappen loves. And when he gets a car he loves, he's comfortable with, he's able to do things that only Max Verstappen can do in that car. And this also goes back to how when you have such a long season, okay, you can either start very strong and then taper away, or you start slow and then you build up, right? And that's what Red Bull's doing, the latter, where they've started slow but they've sort of built up through the season. It's how Red Bull have traditionally been. It's something that Max did not want Red Bull to be doing. He wanted Red Bull to have very strong starts, but I think Red Bull somewhat got misled or got slowed down by the whole Christian Horner saga. So in a way, it's good he's out of the way, and then suddenly, Max is winning again with Red Bull, and I almost never imagined that would happen.
So do you think that there is actually a direct correlation there between Horner leaving and the uptick in form? I mean, it certainly seems that way in terms of results, but I know that there's such long lead times in Formula One that that's often quite a simple explanation. But do you think that that's the truth in this scenario, that there's a lot of Christian Horner absence that's helping them out?
I mean, I actually made a short on this, which people were finding very funny, saying Red Bull should have just sacked Christian Horner earlier, and Max would have probably been the world champion now. But truthfully, no, it's just the optics that Christian Horner went, and 3 races later, Max is back in the title fight. It's just the optics. However, we should keep in mind that if Christian Horner, which is what a lot of people have been reporting, and we'll never be able to verify this piece of news or this piece of chatter, that Christian Horner gave up on the 2025 title battle way earlier, right? So if he did do that, it would have impacted the pace of the developments that Red Bull were probably going to bring in the latter part of 2025. So I think it's more about the attitude, that if he did give up, then attitudinally you just look forward to 2026 and so on. But I think whatever it is, I think it's given us a fantastic storyline in 2025, which otherwise the storyline would have just been McLaren ran away and then they threw papayas at everyone, including both the drivers, more so Oscar Piastri.
Oh, we are going to come to that. But yes, thank the Lord that Red Bull is still bringing floor updates in Mexico, because otherwise, you're right. I think this would have been a very one-dimensional championship, and I think a lot of people would have turned off. I think even for us, we found it difficult to get fully engaged in this until the papayas started to get thrown. But I do want to come back to what you just said, because I think it's a dangerous game to play, and that long season thing is important. A lot of people have compared what's happening this season with 2007, but I'd argue that in 2007, with at race 20 or 19, we're at 20, we're at the moment, the season was long finished. They didn't. You don't have that length of time, and McLaren would have sewed this up back in 2007, but we've still got another 5 races to go. So I don't. It's a really difficult balance to reach, isn't it, between preparing for what is going to be an absolutely seismic change in 2026 and continuing to bring updates for the car that they have right now. And I agree with you. I 100% agree with you that this is very Red Bull. I remember 2013 going into a new rule set, and Red Bull, despite having almost no competition, got duped into continuing to develop the car, resulting in Vettel getting 9 race wins at the end of that season. Great, but
yeah, and why even just go back to 2013, which a lot of new fans wouldn't know, but 2021,
yes,
they threw everything at that car in 21 and still had the best car on the grid in 2022. So Red Bull do have the DNA to not get lost. And of course, a lot of this is down to luck. A lot of this is down to interpretation of regulations and rules and where you stand. But I don't, I mean, Red Bull are a smart bunch of people, very smart actually. I don't believe they would give up 2026 for 2025. Because in fact, the stakes are higher, right? 2025 is anyway lost, technically. If 2026 is lost, they do risk losing Max Verstappen, or they could risk losing Max. So I'm pretty sure they've got their bases covered in the end.
That's an argument I've heard as well, and I get it. I like it. It's a neat argument that they are expecting to be highly uncompetitive next season. Although that's not what Laurent Mekies has said. He sounds very excited about it. But in 2021, with that rule change, they did have a secret weapon that they don't have right now. And that was Mr. Ground Effects dissertation Adrian Newey, who was the only one in the paddock that realised that actually it wasn't about peak downforce. It was about having a stable mechanical package, right?
Absolutely. And he actually worked on the suspension himself because he knew that a lot would come from that suspension. And, one area where I at the end of at the start of the season I was questioning is, this is Red Bull, this year's Red Bull has Adrian Newey in its DNA. Basically, it's Adrian Newey's car.
Yes.
Can the new management actually fix it? And they have managed to fix it. So I think that's a great sign that the designer who built the car is now at another team as a partner. And Pierre Vacher and a lot of others in that team. And let's remember, a lot of people have left Red Bull to go to other teams. Rob Marshall, the guy who brought McLaren to where it is today, is former Red Bull. And if you read Mark Webber's biography, and I would urge everyone to read that, he has written some great stories of Rob Marshall rolling on the floor to celebrate Red Bull's wins back in the 2010s. So what I mean is it's great to see Red Bull still continue down that ruthless streak that's always in their DNA, and including the whole Tapegate. I mean, people thought it was Christian Horner and his persona which rubbed off on the team, where they were always cheeky, always borderline unsportsmanlike, unfair, will do whatever it takes to win. I love the Tapegate. It just shows Red Bull is Red Bull, even if Horner and comes and goes and whoever else comes and goes.
I 100% agree with you. I absolutely love it. It was vintage Red Bull, just testing the absolute boundaries of what they can get away with it. I mean, they didn't quite get away with it on this occasion, but I love the craft. And yeah, I agree with you. I just worry that combination of the staff that they've lost and the challenge of having a brand new powertrain under their own auspices, is it too much for them to take on? I don't know, and I don't necessarily need an answer to that question.
I don't have an answer. Yeah. No, we won't have an answer. But I'll always put it this way: what Red Bull is doing in Formula One is not what an energy drinks company should be doing. When they entered Formula One, everyone thought that's the party team, and they said, "Oh yeah, just by the way, if we get a race win, we'll cling on to it." And they're probably at 120 plus race wins now, right? They're beating car manufacturers at car racing, right? So I wouldn't put it beyond Red Bull to actually come out all guns blazing with Ford, with everyone else next year. It's just another set of rules that they have to master, and I think they will end up being top 3 teams, if not top 2 again next year. Again, just a wild guess given on just how well oiled that team is.
That is a hot take if ever I heard one. but just to pick up on that, the energy drinks company that is beating manufacturers, there's something about the fact that they are unencumbered by a history. Ferrari have tradition, they have history. They everything that they do, their process is based on what they did before, and McLaren is sometimes hamstrung by that. And I think actually some of the problems that we'll talk about McLaren having right now are because of the tradition that they have. As much as the regime there has changed, actually the DNA of the team, as you call it, hasn't really changed. and Red Bull's DNA is it's a race team. They exist. That entity exists to go racing and to maximize the outer limits of what that means, and it makes them so dangerous, as we're seeing now. I do want to talk about Max, right? Because one of the things that I find really interesting is how, as the car has come good, Max has switched to another gear. You work with a lot of drivers. You work with a lot of younger drivers who are coming through, and they're out to win championships as well. Two things here. Helmut Marko said, now the car's coming good, Max is coming good. But in the middle of the season, you could tell, actually, the car wasn't so great. He wasn't talking about Formula One. He was talking about winning GT3 races at the Nordschleife. So how much of this is the car? How much of it is Max suddenly switching to a level that we haven't seen him do before? Because I haven't seen him chase a championship like he's doing right now. So how much of it is the driver and how much of it is the car, if you had to put a number to it?
I think that's a fantastic analogy and a great question. And typically in time, if you look at Formula One in history, it always used to be 80% driver, 20% car. And I'm going many, many decades back. And then I would say it's always in modern history been more about the car, because if you need a car at your end before you can do anything with it, right? But I always believe in two things. First is, have you done enough to be selected as that driver for that car? So a Lewis making it to Mercedes, a Max making it to Red Bull, a Michael making it to Ferrari, although that's way back in time. They did what they had to do to be eligible to be in the best car. So that was one, right? And second is, when you do have the best car, right? Do you have it in you to dominate, right? And if I can, Gunther Steiner, who was I interviewed him for Fancore. One of the things he left the interview to say, can you imagine Max in the McLaren?
Oof.
Right. So while I haven't given you a direct answer, what I mean to say is, Max definitely is creating a very powerful car into dominating results. He's able to extract, he's able to do things, he's able to create momentum that others are not capable of doing so, right? And when I say others, I'm just, for this moment, for this example, talking of Piastri and Norris, right? Technically, just before the summer break, they were just scoring 1-2s everywhere. And that was McLaren's most dominant period. But if you look back at earlier parts of the season, and if you look into most recent races, they've not managed to extract everything. I don't believe McLaren have lost pace. I just believe they've not had the best execution. And that's what Max and Red Bull together are brilliant at. They've built a great car. They've got a driver who doesn't make mistakes. They've got a team that is so spot on with execution. And I mean, if we were to look at the form factor after Zandvoort, not many people would, disagree with me if I said Max is in pole position to win all the next 5 races. And that's why suddenly he's the title favorite, saying Max has done it. He can do it. And he will do it again if if everything comes to it.
Isn't that nuts, though? It's absolutely nuts to even think that driver who was 104 points behind is now, in your words, and mine too, championship favourite. It's incredible, but it is that symbiosis, isn't it, between car and driver. And I think that I've come to this conclusion that it isn't that Max somehow gets a magic extra 0.3 out of the car. It's the fact that, as you say, the drivers in that papaya car are just not able to extract the absolute potential that is in it, and that's what hampers him. But
if I just
please.
add, I think they have extracted that potential at several races, but not as consistently as the likes of Max and, say, Lewis have in recent times. And at least in the case of McLaren, if Lando hasn't extracted it, Oscar has, and Oscar hasn't extracted it, Lando has. And I think that's where the papaya problem is. 2 alpha male drivers who are so close to each other that even the team is torn. that, okay, we have to keep supporting both, something that I think they're trying to be as fair as they can be. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's just that there is that slight edge, and that's why we'll never know the answer to the question. But can you imagine Max Verstappen in that McLaren this year? He would have probably just sealed all of it.
The problem for me, Kunal, is that I think, yes, Max absolutely would have. That's a given. But I think if you put Leclerc or Russell, like for me, those three drivers, and there's a gap between them, but those three drivers have been the standouts of this season, because when the time has come, they've not missed. Just look at what Leclerc did at the US Grand Prix just last weekend. It was this is why I go out watching Formula One, right? To watch an absolute master at work. And I think if you put any of those three drivers in that McLaren car, I think they dominate the other guy. And there's a little bit of I think there's a little bit of championship naivety that comes into it from those two. In a way that I feel like I have very little doubt that if Leclerc was given a championship contending car, that he would get the best out of that car and come as close as he could to winning a title, and Russell would do the same. I think I went into this season not necessarily knowing what Oscar would do, because he's too early in his career, but having some doubts about Lando, just given prior form. What do you think to that? Because I know we've talked about it before, and I know that you've also talked about it on the Inside Line podcast. How does that work for you?
I would say yes. It's the first time that the McLaren drivers are finding themselves in this position, right? And there are lots of firsts out here. First is Lando Norris would have probably thought that Oscar wouldn't be making the kind of step that he's made between 24 and 25, right? So Lando's gone from competing with Max to having the most dominant car and then being dominated by his teammate. I mean, Oscar's been leading the Drivers' Championship since Jeddah this year, which is somewhere in April, right? So that's a long time that he's been leading the championship, and he's been leading on merit, right? And of course, Lando had the initial challenges where he wasn't feeling comfortable in the car, wasn't able to put it there. But a lot of Lando's recent results uh, make me believe, the whole question that can Lando handle the pressure, right? Can you imagine? He's the one in the last 4 or 5 races that's actually handled the pressure far better. Maybe this is where Lando's experience of going up against Max last year is coming handy, because Oscar wasn't up against anyone but himself last year, right? So lots of things in the mix out here. I also believe that uh, the McLaren drivers just seem a little suffocated, to me at least. It seems like that is creating additional pressure on them. There is this there is constant concern that, by the way, pretty much all the races, both the papaya cars have been together there and or thereabouts, right? So there's always a concern. Did I nudge him a little? What if I get nudged? I will lose track position in qualifying, and I'll have some repercussions. I'll have something or the other thrown at me, and then guess what? It's going to damage my championship standings. It's going to So I think there is a lot of internal pressure that's been created, which is frankly just unwanted. I mean, let them just go racing. And I believe the likes of Leclerc, the likes of Russell, like you quoted them, of course, are in a more free environment because they're not in a championship battle. But let's also remember, Leclerc has not yet been challenged by Lewis Hamilton, and Antonelli is yet to challenge Russell as well, right? And the reason why I give that example is because, Lando and Oscar have been there like a shadow to each other in these 19 odd races that we've been at, this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think we need to talk about the way that McLaren have gone about their business. I just want to not play you, but just quote something. So this is Lewis yesterday talking about Lando and Oscar's chances. What do they need to do? And he said, look, he was talking about Max. He said he's going to take this from them if they don't do the same. And I've been saying exactly, not just me, Amar and I have both been saying what you've just said, that the fact that there are these rules, oh my God, I can't touch my teammate, or I can't attack my teammate. If I try and do a dive bomb, I'm going to get told off on the radio. It always seems to come down on Oscar's side of the fence, but I'll talk about that in a second. But there's definitely a sense that they are hemmed in a little bit, and they cannot drive in a free, expressive way that they want to, because there's always that risk of somebody coming on the radio and telling them they've done something wrong or having to give a position back. And they don't want that, or having repercussions for the rest of the season. It's something that, as you say, because maybe it's because they're not being challenged by their teammates, but Verstappen, Russell and Leclerc do not have to worry about that. And you get to see them at their very best. Whereas I think you get to, even at the height of their powers, you got to see the McLaren as at its very best, but you never quite got to see its drivers. And I think that comes down to the mentality that we talked about. Red Bull is a race team that everything is about maximizing everything to get both the prizes that are available at the end of the season. Whereas, I listen to Zach Brown and he sounds very much like, well, if we don't win the drivers, well, at least we did it the right way. How can you go racing that way?
And let's remember, 2026 is a reset. Maybe this is the only chance Norris or Piastri might ever have to Formula One championship glory. Even if McLaren wins it with another driver, say 10 years or 5 years later or whatever, from a driver, and it's the human psychology, I think that's probably one of those differentiators, like you've also been pointing out, that the characters are being controlled too much by a lot of the corporate politicking, a lot of the papaya rules, as we call it. And, that's just how it goes. But McLaren want to sort of say this up front, that we want this partnership to continue for a longer time. And the only way to doing that is the current way of how they are managing, the two drivers and the relationship between them and the team, and no prioritization, no favoritisms, etc., etc. But yeah, I mean, we're here for racing. We don't really care about corporate PR. I mean, for that we've got the newspapers, right? Go read all the financial newspapers. There's a lot of corporate PR in there.
Just a quick aside, Javier. Wow, mate, you're too generous. Javier asks, where's your partner in crime? Oh, poor old Amar is crying his Lyco tears. Sometimes the best way is to just keep your head down. He says he enjoys the Inside Line podcast as well. I mean, who doesn't enjoy the Inside Line podcast? It is.
Thank you.
It is standard setting. I want to come back to this papaya rules thing and how it's affecting both drivers. I have talked about this quite a lot on this podcast. I've been criticised by Amar. I've been criticised by our listeners. I need some support. Just you need to be on my side about this.
Of course.
but I think, actually, you know what? Before I give you my spiel, everyone's here to listen to you, so I'm going to ask you the question. Oscar was absolutely incredible for the beginning of this season. Like at tracks where he had performed, abysmally, even in 2024, right. China, I'm looking at you. He suddenly pole in the win, leaving everybody in the dust. And now we get to the last few races from Zandvoort onwards, which he won. What the heck has happened? What has happened?
Firstly, I'll put it this way, that I have a theory. Kota has always been a bogey track for him, right? There's a lot of driving which is uninstinctive for drivers, and that sort of driving just comes with a lot of experience. And to put it simply, what does that mean? There are areas in which you push as a driver which you actually do not push in Kota, right? And that's where Oscar was actually losing out a lot, which is why he couldn't keep up with Lewis in the Ferrari, and that Lewis's Ferrari was anyway the slower Ferrari of the two, right? So that's Kota. It was a bogey track. And while growing up in the Formula One paddock, there's always this thing where you're always allowed one bad race in a season. But at that time, the season was, 15 or 16 races. So let's say it's 24 races and you're allowed one and a half bad race, if we put it as that. So if quota is that half bad race, I think the one bad race was Baku, which was very uncharacteristic.
It was
And
very bad though, Kunal. It was very,
yeah,
very bad.
and to my mind, Baku was actually a reaction from what happened in Monza, because we had that situation in Monza, a slow stop. It just kept brewing into Oscar, and to the extent where does one draw the line? Tomorrow I'm leading the race, and somebody actually commented on the Inside Line F1 podcast a couple of days ago, saying Max Verstappen is going to be leading in Abu Dhabi, right? Whoever is second, and whoever, say Oscar's second and Lando's third, and the only way a McLaren driver can win is if one gives up track position to the other. And that's when papaya rules will come into play. Like, okay, Oscar, you need to let Lando through so he becomes world champion. And there is a scenario that things like that could very well happen. So to my mind, it's a lot down to just how McLaren probably never imagined that Max would come fighting the way he has come fighting. They never imagined one would catch up the way these I would say Red Bull and Max Verstappen have caught up. And I'm just honestly excited that there's a three-way battle, and Max has got such a strong outside chance. Tell me this, Sherry. When was the last time Max had so many people cheering for him to win?
I'm always cheering for him. Everyone should know that. You're right. You're right. Last year it was complete role reversal, wasn't it? And yeah, people were slightly unfairly booing him, I thought, at a few races. But yeah, absolutely, everybody's a Max fan right now. But
And just to complete that Piastri point, right? So he's had that bad race in Baku. He came back strong in Singapore. He outqualified Lando in Singapore, and then of course there was that turn one incident. And again, a lot of this, when you look back at his disappointment, it's the disappointment is all like, hey, what about papaya rules now? Whether it was the bad pit stop in Monza, whether it was the safety car situation in Silverstone, whether it was Singapore, and whatever happened, right? So I think a lot of it is just down to, if I'm not having a good time, how can I use papaya rules to make sure my teammate doesn't have a good time either?
yes, I mean 100%. Yes, because I think this isn't something that started in Zandvoort, I think, or in Baku, or even in Monza. I don't think. I think Monza was just a reaction to everything that has happened to poor old Oscar up until now. And a lot of people, even in our comments, you'll see this in a second, will disagree with me. But you can reel it off. Australia called off before the first pit stops when he'd saved a bit of tyres to attack his teammate. Hungary. I don't blame McLaren for putting Lando on the alternate strategy. That's totally fine. But reprimanding the chasing driver for having a go, I'm not sure I agree with that. Same in Austria, and then again, this is complete nonsense. The fact that it's even a possibility that a driver, after getting a penalty, can lobby their team, I'm talking about Silverstone, to swap them back is ridiculous. But he will have seen that as a slight. And then came Monza, and I think the heaviness of all of that, seeing Max start to eat into his title bid, the car not being quite as good. You talk about the crash in Baku, but actually in Q2 he was less than a tenth away from Lando's time. So yes, he crashed in Q3, but actually they weren't that far away in pace even then. But all of that, I think it just adds up. And the poor guy, this is the first time he's been in a proper championship battle. And conversely, I think Lando was in that position at the beginning of the season where the burden of fighting for the title was on him. He's the favourite, he's the golden boy, he's the guy that has always been team leader at McLaren. I think he was expected to lead the charge, and I think the pressure of that got to him. After Zandvoort, he even said it, look, all I need to do now is just win every race. And he has driven like that.
Right.
But that leads me to my next question, Kunal, which I think you've answered somewhere before. Is it time for team orders? And if you're going to team order at McLaren, who's it going to be?
I hope there are no team orders because, a three-way battle is definitely more fun than a two-way battle. Because imagine the stakes in a three-way battle, right? If you are Oscar and you go wheel to wheel with Max, you know that if you come out far worse, not only will you lose points, but maybe Max could gain points and even Lando. And then the same applies for, Max and Lando in that, in the heat of the moment. And we remember Max when Max is defending, we know how strong he is defending, but even Max now has to, has to be measured in his approach because he cannot afford a DNF. He cannot afford a clash where he's suddenly rolling into the pit lane at the end of lap 1 or lap 3 and then, putting on a hard tires with the hope that he suddenly gets to score more points, right? So I think a three-way battle is really crucial. So I hope McLaren, or rather I'm glad they've said that they're not going to prioritize one till at least one driver is mathematically out of contention, right? And let's for one assume that we wanted to still say no, who would you still prioritize, right? And Oscar's been the better driver through the season. And when I say better, I do not mean faster. It doesn't matter if you're the faster driver. What matters is who's the one who's been most bankable with points, right? And even if a lot, I'm reading the chat. So Rand the man is saying Norris has undoubtedly got more pace, but Norris is not the one with the most points, right? Blaming Michael is saying Oscar was slow in Singapore race. Well, I'm going to just address that tactically, right? McLaren actually have scenarios they discuss pre-race, and if those scenarios play out, you're not going to be able to make an overtake on your teammate. You're not going to be able to get into, a 2 second window where you are able to jump him in the pit stop. So a lot of these scenarios are down to who's getting pole, who's got priority during the pit stops, who's actually leading after turn 1, lap 1, etc. And when you realize you're not in that position where you can enforce something, you just drive your race and bank those points. And that's what, for example, Oscar did in Singapore. That's also why Oscar wanted papaya rules to switch so that he gets the prioritized position, especially in a team like McLaren, which is so hell-bent on equal treatment to the drivers, right? So back to my point that would you back Piastri just because he's been strong? He's had a stronger baseline and more points through the season and now has a lead, but has sort of faltered in the last 3 or 4 races? Or would you actually back Lando, who's got momentum his side, right? And that's such a tough choice to make. So you just have to let it play out on track. And I'm so glad that they're letting them do that.
You say letting, I say forced. I don't. I think if they were going to pick one driver over the other, their chance to do that was many races ago. Because as you say, right now you've got the lead driver is having a crisis of confidence, and the not lead driver is suddenly in the ascendancy. How can you impose team orders now unless, as you say, mathematically it becomes impossible? And I think, if I'm honest, the driver who has it in their hands the most is Oscar. If he gets a win or two under his belt, then it changes this conversation completely. The problem is, do you see him winning a race?
I don't believe I see him winning a race, right? I don't believe I see either of the McLaren drivers winning a race, right? And there is theory behind this. It's not just my inner belief. Like I said at the start, Red Bull's throwing everything at it. They're bringing upgrades after upgrades. So when you bring these upgrades and say they deliver, and most of the times they do because there's a lot of simulation that goes into them, and Red Bull's got this momentum, Max has got this momentum. So I just get a feeling McLaren are no longer the quickest car on the grid, right? So go on.
But I was going to say, but that comes back to the fact that Red Bull have a lead driver that they can throw updates at. McLaren will turn around and say, well, we gave you guys a car that was dominant, but without picking a driver to mold that car around, those updates are now very sort of jack of all trades. They cover both drivers, but they don't allow one driver to shine. that's what McLaren need. And when I talk about these guys having to drive within themselves, yes, it's great to see them going at each other, but I don't think we are seeing the best Lando Norris or the best Oscar Piastri. We're seeing the best Max Verstappen, and that's why so many of us, me included, would be really stoked to see him win the championship, because he's the only one who's driving at their best. But a lot of that, I think, is down to McLaren, not down to the drivers. So when people say, it's just down to the drivers to bring this championship home, they've been given the goods, I don't completely agree with that.
So I agree with you on, that they've not been given the goods, right? And by that, prioritization, by that, has McLaren worked wholeheartedly in maximizing one driver's chances every weekend, right? That means prioritized pit stops, that means prioritized race calls, qualifying position runs, and all of that. And that's not, because they are trying to treat both drivers equally, whereas in the case of Red Bull, they just need to tell Yuki, give Max a tow, and there are no questions asked. In fact, they get Liam to give him a tow.
Although Oscar was also asked to do that in Monza.
Yeah, that's true, yeah. And Oscar did do that.
Which is insane. Yeah. Why did he say yes to that?
I mean, can you imagine how bulletproof their contracts might be, and how bulletproof their agreements might be? And these things can change after you have a world title. But while you are there fighting for it, you will still always be...
They seem scared to lose their contract because am I going to get this chance again? Am I going to be kicked out of this potentially championship-winning team next season?
But I must add more perspective on what you said about McLaren not bringing upgrades to help one particular driver or not, right? Now, typically, as Formula One has grown as an engineering sport, it is an engineering sport. Let's remember that, right? There are more engineers in the sport than racers, to put it that way, right? What's happened is there is an engineering formula which works best and makes the car the quickest, right? And that's the road you will follow. You will, of course, have tools to help your drivers settle in, but no longer are cars built around a driver. No longer is it that obvious or that apparent that this car is only for that driver, and hence the other drivers are struggling. And that's where the Red Bull second driver theory somewhat struggles, because of course that Red Bull is driven on extremes by Max, but I think that's an outlier, right? But having said that, Lando, who was not comfortable in the first part of the season, was not able to feel the suspension and the tires as well as he could last year, and he was very vocal about it. McLaren introduced a suspension upgrade. Well, it wasn't really an upgrade because it didn't bring performance. It just got Lando the feel back in his hands as he would. And Oscar chose to not use it. I believe he still doesn't use it because he's happy with whatever the car was in 2025. So they are helping each driver settle in the car while saying, this is the fastest car that we can build. Now you go figure out the fastest way to drive it, because that's what you do as a driver. So just wanted to sort of expand a little bit more on how McLaren are trying to make it work with both the drivers, because you almost cannot just say, okay, this is one particular way of driving the car, especially in the ground effects era. There's a very peculiar car characteristics that pretty much everyone in all the teams, everyone in the paddock, everyone's been fighting, which is what we'll typically hear most of the race weekends, which is low speed understeer and high speed oversteer, and how do you sort of find the balance between the two? And that eventually when you find that balance, you're just like, dude, that's the best balance you can get. Now you figure a way to drive it around.
But you can flip that the other way and say that you can either try and make the car have that balance, or you make the car extreme and you hire a driver that can bring that balance for you, right? And that I think is a kind of what Max brings at Red Bull, that he's so happy with that, with the loose rear end in the high speed corners, that you can pile on a heap of downforce on the front end and counteract that understeer in the low speed corners. And it seems that McLaren have found a way, perhaps by moving the center of gravity slightly further backwards to bring that into their car. But it's not their drivers necessarily doing that. but if one of their drivers was able to sort of really rocket forward, and be able to, lead the development that meant that they were clearly faster, then presumably logically McLaren would bring updates that go with that faster driver, even if that is to the detriment of the second driver.
Or maybe McLaren just need that faster driver in the car if it's not the. But can you imagine? We've got 9 rookies in FP1. At some point there will be a Max Verstappen Peter somewhere out there. Everyone's looking for it, including Red Bull, right? And is it Arvid Lindblad? Is it Isaac Hadjar? Is it, I don't know, is it Paul Aaron? Is it, Jack Crawford? So many drivers who are getting a shot at it. We'll never know. Maybe it's Gabriel Bortoleto. I get a very good feeling about that guy.
Me too. I like him. Well, Arvid, your friend is he did very well in FP1, didn't he? He was a 10th faster than Yuki and 6/10 off the fastest. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, and a lot of this is down to what run plans they've been given,
sure.
and what the team. I mean, I'm actually glad that they're being allowed to push, because a couple of years ago, I remember it was Yuri Vips in the car, right? And the minute he sat in the car, massive hype, Estonian driver, the first one to make it. Of course, a lot of pride in your first run, and guess what? The team does. They put all the sensors on the car, and they tell you to drive at 20 kilometers per hour and be like, go pick up all the data for the team.
Yeah.
So at least here they're getting competitive-ish runs in, and gives me a lot of joy to watch junior drivers get these chances. I know how hard I know how hard all of them work. Like, there is no exception. Like, every single junior driver is working so hard on fitness, on mental training, on sponsors, because you do need to put money on the table in this modern era of Formula One.
Well, yeah, 100%. But I mean, to your previous point, I can't see anyone telling Arvid Lindblad or Pato O'Ward to slow down. I don't think they'd listen. But it's interesting that we've got to that point where maybe McLaren's issue is they just need a driver like a Max or a George or a Charles to just put their foot down and say this is the direction we're going to go. Okay, final little section. Mexico, love it. Who's going to win?
I think it's going to be Max.
What?
Most definitely.
Shocker.
I mean, at this moment, I think they've got the fastest package out there. And maybe I think Mercedes is going to be second quickest. So
why do you say that? I've heard you say it before. Why Mercedes?
I think the top 3 teams are pretty much top 4 teams are evenly matched, right? And it's all down to circuit characteristics. It's all down to circuit temperatures. A lot is down to temperatures. And I just get a feeling, Mercedes has been upgrading their car as well, while McLaren and Ferrari have stopped doing that. And in Kota, I mean, when you compare all the data, Toto Wolff said we had the pace to win, which is actually true. It's all about who is in free air up in the front, right? And I remember reading this graphic saying whoever has led on lap 1 or led the race after lap 1 has gone on to win the race. And I think that's true for the last 10, 15, 20 races or something. Yeah, absolutely. I think Ferrari spent all their credits on their rear suspension, which brought massive benefits, didn't it? Kunal, I think we've got to the end of this. Someone's noticed my washing machine. I think it just it did give us the little tone to say maybe wrap this up, Shez. Kunal, thank you so much for coming. I really, really appreciate it. Hopefully Amara will be back next time. But this has been an absolute pleasure. Where can people find you? Pretty much on Twitter most of the times. Whoever is anyone around in Norway, you feel free to reach out to me. It's always good to. That's where I live in, pretty much in the Formula One season. Off season, I spend time in Mumbai, since I have the privilege of working with multiple broadcasters in Formula One. But and the Inside Line F1 podcast. Thank you for giving us a shout out. And I hope I have done a decent job and haven't been too much off the pace to what Amar would have done on the tired GP.
We agreed a lot more than Amar and I would, I'll be honest with you. Right, with that, as usual, please like, please subscribe, please leave us a comment. We'll read every single one. We'll reply to as many as we possibly can, and we will see you guys